My mother had two voices. There was the sharp, metallic one she used to run her company, and the smooth, warm one she used when she was lying. I was used to the sharp voice. It was the one she mostly used on me, but the smooth one. That one was dangerous. It was the one she used right before she rolled her eyes at an investor. And it was the one she started using on my grandmother, right before a check for her medication bounced. The apartment was always cold. Not a comfortable, cozy cold. It was the sterile chill of glass walls and white marble floors. The air smelled like window cleaner and nothing else. From my spot on the low gray sofa, I could see the city lights blur through the evening rain. I could also hear my mother, Claire. She was in the kitchen, but her voice filled the whole space. "The Q4 projections are unacceptable," she said. Her voice was sharp, metallic. It was her business voice, the one that made people stand up straighter. "Fix the slide deck. I want it by midnight." I pulled my knees to my chest and kept scrolling on my phone. My screen was the only warm light in the room. Claire walked past me, a thin silhouette in a gray pantsuit. She was tapping her wireless earbud, her eyes fixed on some point in the air across the room. She didn't look at me. She just kept moving, her hard-soled shoes clicking on the marble. "No, I don't care about the server load. I care about the launch. Make it work." She paced back to the kitchen island, picked up her other phone, her personal one, and glanced at the screen. Her business call continued in her ear. "Hold on," she said into the earbud. She tapped her personal phone and a different voice filled the room. A voice I actually wanted to hear. "Claire? Are you there? I don't know what to do." It was Grandma Evelyn. Her voice was thin, unsteady. It sounded like old paper. "Mom? What is it? I'm on a major call." Claire's voice was annoyed, strained. "It's my prescription," Evelyn said, her words rushing. "The pharmacy. They said, Claire, they said my check bounced. It's never bounced before. I had the money. I checked the book. I don't understand." I sat up. I watched my mother's back. Her shoulders tensed, then relaxed. She turned, leaned against the counter, and her entire voice changed. "Oh, Mom, don't you worry about that." It was the smooth voice. The smooth voice was not her business voice. It was not the annoyed voice. It was the voice she used when an investor got nervous, or when a journalist asked a hard question. It was a low, warm sound. It was the sound of a verbal pat on the head. "The bank must be having glitches," Claire said, her voice like warm honey. "You know how these new systems are. I'll sort the transfer right now. Don't you think about it for another second. It's handled." I heard Grandma Evelyn let out a shaky breath. "Oh, okay, if you're sure. I was just so worried." "It's fine. I have to go, Mom. This call is important." "Okay, dear. Love you." Claire ended the call. She took a breath, tapped her earbud, and her business voice clicked back on. "Right. Where were we?" "The Q4 numbers. Unacceptable." She turned and paced back toward her home office. As she passed me, she gesture-rolled at my phone. "Don't you have homework to do, Maya?" "Go do your homework." She disappeared into her office, and the glass door slid shut with a quiet thud. I stayed on the sofa. The command wasn't a question. It wasn't mean. It was just dismissal, like brushing a piece of lint off her suit. I waited. I waited until the sound of her voice became a low, angry murmur behind the glass. I looked at the rain on the window. A glitch. You know how these new systems are. I knew my mother's smooth voice. It was the one she used when she was fixing a problem, or when she was causing one. A seed of doubt, small and cold, sat in my stomach. I waited 2 more hours. The apartment went dark, except for the slice of light from under her office door. The sound of her call finally stopped. Then I heard the faint snick of her bedroom door closing. The apartment was silent. I slipped off the sofa. My bare feet made no sound on the cold floor. I walked to the kitchen island. Her laptop was there, plugged in, lid closed, the one she used for personal things. My heart started to beat fast. This was wrong. I knew it was wrong, but I also knew her password. I'd seen her type it into her phone a dozen times. She thought I was always looking at my own screen. I opened the lid. The screen glowed, asking for a password. My fingers hovered over the keys. I typed Claire's Biz 1, the desktop appeared. It was clean, minimalist, just like the apartment. A few icons, a browser, a folder labeled Projects, and a folder labeled Evelyn Estate. My hand was shaking a little. An estate was something for after. Not for now, I double-clicked. It wasn't a will. It wasn't a plan. It was just files, bank statements, PDFs, scans. I opened the most recent one. Evelyn, joint account, summary. I saw a long list of dates and 2 columns of numbers. Money out, money in. My eyes scanned the out column. Small amounts, 300, 500, 250, over and over. 3 or 4 times a week. They were all transfers. I looked at the destination for each one. revenge.Every. I felt my stomach go hollow. I knew that name. I'd heard her say it on calls 100 times. revenge. Claire Venti Operations. It was her company. Her failing company, I scrolled back. Months. A full year. Small, regular transfers. A slow, steady drain. I closed the file. My breath caught in my chest. The check for the medication didn't bounce because of a glitch. It bounced because the money was gone. The next morning, I told Claire I was going to the library. She just nodded, her eyes on her tablet. I took the number 14 bus across the river, away from the tall glass towers and the silent streets. The bus was loud. It hissed and groaned, and the seats were covered in a scratchy blue fabric. I watched the neighborhoods change. The buildings got shorter, made of old red brick. The shops had colorful, hand-painted signs instead of glowing white letters. I got off on Grandma Evelyn's street. It smelled like damp pavement and yeast from the corner bakery. Her apartment building was old, with a heavy wooden door that I had to push hard. The hallway inside was warm and smelled like old carpet and furniture polish. I walked up the 2 flights of stairs. I could hear a radio playing softly from behind her door, number 2B. I knocked. The radio stopped. Just a moment. Her voice was muffled. I heard a chain slide and 2 locks turn. The door opened, and she was there. Evelyn was small, swallowed up by a thick, knitted cardigan. Her white hair was a little messy. Maya! Oh my goodness. What a surprise. Her face lit up, and she pulled me into a hug. She smelled like tea leaves and lavender soap. It was a smell I'd known my whole life. Hi, Grandma. Come in, come in. I was just making some tea. Her apartment was the exact opposite of our place. Every surface was covered. Piles of books, framed photos of people I didn't know, a ceramic jar full of pens, a half-finished puzzle. The air was warm and still. You're just in time, she said, bustling into her tiny kitchen. I put the kettle on. Now sit down. Tell me everything. I sat at her small, round dining table. The open checkbook was right next to my elbow. I saw the last entry, the one for the pharmacy. The line was blank where the bank would have stamped it, paid. She brought over 2 mugs, both chipped, and a box of cookies. So, she said, sitting across from me. To what do I owe the pleasure? Not that I'm complaining. I worry about you in that big, quiet apartment. I just wanted to see you, I said. It was true. And I heard you on the phone last night. With Mom. Evelyn's smile faded. She looked down and stirred her tea, even though there was nothing in it. Oh, that. It was just a silly mix-up. Was it? I asked, my voice quiet. She stopped stirring. She looked at the checkbook, then at me. Her eyes were bright, and I saw her press her lips together. Your mother. She's so smart, Maya, so busy. She runs everything. What did she do, Grandma? Evelyn put the spoon down. She took a slow, shaky breath. She said it would be safer this way. That's what she said. After your grandfather passed, she said I shouldn't be worrying about online things. She traced the edge of her mug with her finger. She helped me set up all my accounts online. She said it would be easier. And then, a few months ago, she said there were all these scams. People trying to trick old women. She said she would manage it for me, to protect me. What does manage mean? I asked, though I already knew. It means... She looked up, and her voice dropped to a whisper. It means I can't log in anymore. She said she changed the passwords just to be safe. She said to just call her if I need anything. She'll handle the transfers. The checkbook sat between us, a relic, a symbol of a time when she was in control. So when I write a check, Evelyn continued, her voice trembling just a little, I have to hope the money is there. I have no way to know. I call and I leave messages. And sometimes she's just too busy. She looked around her own apartment, at her own things, as if she were seeing them for the first time. I feel like a guest in my own life, she said. My stomach twisted. That was it. That was the same feeling I had every day in the cold glass apartment. A guest, an intern, a problem to be managed. Claire wasn't just dismissing me. She was dismissing her own mother. I reached across the table and put my hand on her checkbook. My anger was a cold, hard stone. It wasn't just about the money. It was about this, making her feel small, making her feel powerless in her own home. She's having a party, I said. It wasn't a question. Evelyn blinked, surprised by my change of subject. Yes, on Thursday. A big one for her company, for her investors. She said it's very, very important. I looked at the checkbook. I looked at her kind, worried face. Very important. I know, I said. I'll be there. The apartment was still cold, but now it was full of noise. Loud, pulsing music came from hidden speakers. The living room was packed with people in expensive suits and sharp dresses. They stood in tight little groups, holding thin-stemmed glasses and laughing too loudly. The air, usually so clean, was thick with the smells of perfume and some kind of warm, spicy food being passed around on black trays. I was standing by the window, watching the city lights. I was wearing a black dress Claire had left on my bed. Look presentable, the note had said. A man in a bright blue shirt smiled at me. And who are you? I don't think we've met. Before I could answer, Claire was there. She put a hand on his arm, her smile bright and hard. David! So glad you could make it. She gestured at me with her free hand, a quick, dismissive flick. This is just Maya, my moody intern. The man's smile at me vanished. He looked back at Claire, his interest gone. An intern? Good, good. Now about that new funding round, Claire laughed, that smooth, polished laugh. She just helps with admin, a little project. She steered the man away toward the kitchen island, which was covered in food, a little project. I was a piece of furniture, a thing to be explained away. I stayed by the window. I watched her work the room. She was electric. She touched arms. She tilted her head. She made every person feel like they were the only one in the room. She was selling her company, selling herself. She was in the center of the largest group, talking to a man and a woman who looked older, more serious. They weren't smiling as much as the others. They were the ones she needed to impress. The growth is simply a matter of scaling, Claire was saying, her voice high and confident. We have the model, we have the tech, we just need the... Her personal phone, the one on the small table beside her, started to ring. It was a loud, cheerful chime that cut right through the music. Everyone in the group looked at the phone. Claire's smile tightened for just a second. She picked it up. The screen lit up the little space between them. I was too far to read the name, but I didn't need to. I knew. Claire let out a very small, very put-upon sigh. She turned to the investors, and she rolled her eyes. She didn't just roll her eyes. She did it slowly, a performance of, "Can you believe this?" The woman next to her gave a small, understanding chuckle. Claire pressed the button on the side of the phone. The ringing stopped. She placed the phone face down on a passing server's tray. She turned back to the investors, her face a perfect mask of strained patience. "I am so sorry about that," she said. Her voice was low, confessional. "It's just my mother." She shook her head as if clearing a heavy thought. "Managing an aging parent. Honestly, it's just so much. It's a full-time job on top of this." She gestured vaguely at the party, at her life. The serious-looking woman's face softened. "Oh, Claire, you shouldn't have to carry all that." "You're amazing, Claire," the man next to her said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Truly." Claire gave them a brave, tired smile. "You do what you have to. Now, as I was saying, the scaling, I watched her. I watched them believe her. They saw a strong, brilliant woman handling an ungrateful, senile parent. They saw a hero. I saw a thief. The sadness I felt in Grandma's apartment, that hot, shaky feeling of injustice, it all went cold. The music in the room seemed to fade. The chatter became a dull buzz. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was clear. It was sharp. It was resolve. She underestimated Grandma. She underestimated me. She thought I was just a moody intern. She thought Grandma was just a problem to be managed. I turned away from the party. No one noticed. I slipped down the hall, past the guest bathroom, and into my room. The apartment's sterile chill felt normal again. I closed the door, shutting out the noise. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. It was time to do my homework. The party's noise was gone. The apartment was back to its normal, sterile silence. The only sound was the quiet click, click, click of my keyboard in the dark. I wasn't just sad anymore. I wasn't just angry. I was cold. I was focused. My mother thought I was a moody intern, an object, a problem. My grandmother was a burden, a checkbook to be drained. We were just things to be managed. I sat at my desk, the glow of the screen lighting my face. I opened a new browser window, a private one. I went to an encrypted email service, one based in another country, one that didn't keep logs. I created a new account. I didn't use my name. I didn't use any name. The email address was just a string of random numbers and letters. For the display name, I typed 2 words, a concerned party. This was the first step. I couldn't move from my own laptop. I had to use her computer. That's where the real files were. I logged back into her personal laptop. Claire's Biz 1, the Evelyn Estate folder, was still there. I copied all of it. Every bank statement, every small transfer to revenge.Every, I saved it to a small gray USB drive. But this was only half the story. It showed what she was doing to Evelyn. It didn't show why. I went back to her desktop. She had a browser bookmark labeled See Venti Portal. I clicked it. A login screen appeared. Claire Venti Operations, Internal. I tried the same password. Claire's Biz 1 access granted. My mother, so smart, so careful, used the same password for everything. She never thought anyone would look. She never thought I would look. I was in. This wasn't her personal laptop. This was her company's server. I saw folders for marketing, HR, and finance. I clicked on finance. I clicked on investor relations. I saw a folder named Projections 2025. Inside, there were 2 slide decks. One was labeled Q4 Internal. The other was Q4 Investor Pitch. I opened Internal first. My stomach dropped. It was a sea of red numbers, charts that pointed down, projections that missed their targets by 50%, a cash flow statement that showed they were bleeding money. They had been in the red for almost 18 months. I closed it. I opened Investor Pitch. It was the slide deck from her business call, the one she wanted fixed by midnight. All the charts pointed up. The numbers were green. The projections were huge. It showed massive, successful growth. It was a complete fantasy. I saved both files to the USB drive, the real one and the fake one. Now I had the why. She was faking her company's performance. She was draining Grandma's accounts to stay liquid, to keep the fantasy alive. But I still needed the final piece. The proof that she knew exactly what she was doing. I opened her business email. It was linked in the portal. I didn't need a password. I used the search bar. I tried Evelyn. Nothing. I tried Mom. Nothing. She was too smart for that. I tried the name of her company. revenge.Every. I found a long email thread. The recipient was Mark, a name I'd seen on other company documents. Her business partner. The thread was from 6 months ago, right after the Evelyn estate folder had been created. I scrolled to the bottom. It was an email from Claire to Mark. It was short. I read it once. I read it again. My hands were cold, but they were not shaking. Mark had asked, "Are you sure this is enough? We're still short for payroll?" Claire's reply was one line. "The old woman won't last forever. We just need to stay liquid for 6 more months." I saved the email. I saved the entire thread. I put it on the USB drive with the bank statements and the 2 slide decks. I had it all. I went back to the inbox and searched for investors. I found a new email, sent just an hour before the party started. It was a calendar invite. To David and the other investors from the party. From Claire Venti. Subject, final pitch, funding dinner. It was for next week. Tuesday night. A private dining room at the Sentry, the most expensive restaurant in the city. This was it. This was the final meeting to get their money. I looked at the date. I looked at the little gray USB drive in my hand. I knew exactly what I had to do. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Claire was barely home. When she was a blur of energy. She was on calls from the moment she woke up. Her voice was always the business voice, sharp, fast, confident. She was preparing for her final pitch. The apartment smelled like the expensive paper of the pitch books she had couriered to her office. She was so focused on her future. She didn't see me. I was just Maya, the moody intern, the quiet digital ghost in her own home. I spent those days in my room. The door closed. The gray USB drive was my only focus. I plugged it into my laptop. I didn't trust her computer anymore. I worked only on my own. I created a new folder on my secure desktop. I moved all the files, the Evelyn estate bank statements, the internal pitch deck with the red falling numbers, the investor pitch deck with the green rising numbers, the email thread with Mark, and the one-line email, "The old woman won't last forever." I didn't just dump them into an email. That was messy. It was emotional. I was past emotion. I was in a place of cold, clear action. I opened a new document. I made a report. On the first page, I put the 2 projections side by side, the real one and the fake one. I drew a simple red box around the conflicting totals. On the second page, I listed the bank transfers from Evelyn's account. I highlighted the date, the amount, and the destination. revenge.Every. On the third page, I pasted the screenshot of the email. The one about the old woman. I kept it clean, simple, easy to read in 2 minutes. The truth? In black and white, I saved the file, revenge report PDF. Then I compressed the PDF into a zip file. A compressed file can be locked. The system asked me for a password. My fingers typed the words before I even thought about them. Never underestimate a grandma. I went back to my anonymous email account. A concerned party. I needed the full list of investors. The invite Claire had sent was only to her top 4. I needed everyone. I waited until she was in the shower. I heard the hiss of the water from down the hall. I walked to her laptop on the kitchen island. I opened it. Claire's Biz 1.I went into her sent mail. I found the email where she sent the investor pitch deck to her business partner, Mark. Mark, she had written, Send this final version to the full investor group. Use the Q4 pitch distribution list. I found her contacts. I found the distribution list named Q4 pitch. There were 12 names. The top 4 were on it. So were 8 others. I copied all 12 email addresses. I went back to my room. I closed the door. I sat down. I opened a new draft in my anonymous account. I pasted the 12 addresses into the to field. For the subject, I wrote, "A matter of due diligence." For the body, I wrote, "Before you sign, review the attached." I attached the lock.zip file. I looked for the Schedule Send button. I found it. The dinner was on Tuesday. The invite said 7 p.m., appetizers. Claire would be smiling. She would be using her smooth voice. I scheduled the email to send on Tuesday at 7:15 p.m. Then I created a second email. I pasted the same 12 addresses. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained only one thing. The password, "Never underestimate." R.E. Grandma scheduled that email to send on Tuesday at 7:17 p.m. I closed my laptop. It was done. The trap was set. All the pieces were in place. The digital ghost had done her work. Tuesday night came. Claire came out of her room at 6:30. She looked amazing. She wore a sharp dark blue dress. Her hair was perfect. She was checking her earrings in the hall mirror. She saw me in the kitchen doorway, watching her. "Big night," she said, her voice bright. She was already performing. "Wish me luck." I just looked at her. "Oh, Maya, don't be so gloomy." She picked up her small, expensive clutch from the counter. "It's a good thing. For both of us. For this whole family." She walked to the door. Her heels clicked on the marble. "I'll be late." "Don't wait up." The door opened and she was gone. The heavy thud of the door closing echoed in the cold, silent apartment. I walked to the living room window. I watched the rain start to fall on the city lights. I looked at the clock on the wall. 7 p.m. She was arriving. She was greeting her investors. I sat on the gray sofa, and I waited. I didn't stay on the sofa. Waiting was not enough. I stood up, walked to the hall closet, and pulled on my black coat. I put my phone in my pocket. I slipped on my sneakers. I left the apartment, the door clicking shut behind me. I rode the elevator down in silence. The lobby was empty. I walked out into the rain. The air was cold and smelled like wet pavement and car exhaust. I didn't take a cab. I took the bus. I sat in the back, the plastic seat cold through my coat. I watched the blurred, colorful lights of the city pass by. I felt calm. My hands were steady. My heart was not racing. It was just beating, slow and regular. I got off 3 blocks from the restaurant. The Sentry was not a place I belonged. It had a dark marble front and tall, heavy doors. A man in a long wool coat stood under a small awning, an umbrella in his hand. I walked past him, under the awning, and pulled the heavy door open. The inside was dark and quiet. It smelled like rich food and old wood. A host, a tall man in a perfectly fitted suit, looked up from his stand. His expression was polite but firm. "Can I help you, miss?" His eyes scanned my wet coat, my sneakers. "I'm here to meet my mother," I said. My voice was even. "Claire Venti. She's in the private dinner." His expression flickered. The name Venti changed things. He was confused. A guest like me, for a host like Claire. But he couldn't take the risk of being wrong. "Of course," he said, his tone a little colder. "Ms. Venti's party is in the Redwood Room, down that hall to the left." "Thank you." I walked down the carpeted hall. It was so thick my feet made no sound. I passed a large, dark painting and a closed set of wooden doors. I heard her voice. I stopped. I didn't go in. I stood back, in a small alcove meant for service carts. The door was open just a crack, enough for me to see inside. It was a long, dark wood table. It was set for 14 people. The top 4 investors were there, plus a few others. And Claire, She was standing at the head of the table. A large screen was on the wall behind her, glowing with one of her green, upward-pointing charts. She was in command. And as you can see, she was saying, her smooth voice filling the room, the Q4 scaling is not just a projection. It's a guarantee. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I checked the time. 7:15 p.m. I looked through the crack in the door. A phone on the table lit up. Then another. The man named David, the serious one from the party, glanced down. He frowned. He tapped his screen. Claire didn't notice. She was pointing to the screen. Our market capture is already exceeding. I checked my phone again. 7:17 p.m. I watched David. He tapped his phone again. He read something. His eyes widened. He picked up his phone and slid it across the table to the woman beside him. She put her wine glass down. She read the screen. Her hand, covered in rings, went to her chest. Another man further down the table opened his own laptop. His head snapped up. He interrupted her. "Claire!" His voice was loud. It cut right through her presentation. Claire stopped. She faltered. "David? I'm sorry, I don't—" "What is this?" he said. He wasn't asking. He was demanding. "This email. A concerned party?" Claire's smile froze. I don't know what you're talking about. This must be spam. It has a password," the woman said, her voice sharp. "It's a report. My team is looking at it right now," David said. He pushed his chair back. "It appears your projections are not accurate. It appears you've been faking them. That's absurd." Claire tried to laugh. It was a high, tight sound. "That is a fabrication. My numbers are—" "It also appears," David said, his voice like ice, "that you've been funding your liquid assets by draining your own mother's bank account." The room went completely silent. Claire's face turned white. That's a lie. While she was staring at him, while her world was cracking, I pulled out my phone. I opened a different app. Not her bank. A new one, a secure trust account. An account I had opened online 2 days ago. I'd used all the documents from her Evelyn estate folder. Her legal name, her date of birth, her social security number. I had linked her old joint account to this new one as an external funding source. It was a simple, legal transfer. I had the new account in Grandma Evelyn's name, waiting. I opened the transfer menu. From Evelyn, joint account, to Evelyn, secure trust, amount. I typed in the full, exact number from the bottom of the last statement. Everything. My thumb hovered over the button. "I can explain," Claire was saying, her voice shaking. "My mother, she's unwell. I manage her funds. It's all legal. It's a loan." I pressed confirm transfer. My screen flashed. Transfer submitted. In the private room, Claire's personal phone, the one sitting on the table, started to buzz. A loud, jarring vibration. It wasn't a notification. It was a call. She looked at it like it was a lifeline. A way out of the silence. She snatched it up. "Hello?" She listened. Her face went from white to gray. "What?" she whispered. "No, that's not possible. Check again." She listened again, her hand gripping the phone. The investors were standing up. They were putting on their coats. They were not speaking. "What do you mean? Overdrawn?" Her voice was a small, broken sound. The investors started to file out of the room. They walked right past her. They didn't look at her. Claire looked up from her phone, her eyes wide and desperate. She looked toward the door, and she saw me standing in the hallway. Watching her, we just looked at each other. She was standing by the head of the long, dark table. The investors were ghosts, shadows moving past her toward the door where I stood. Their footsteps were silent on the thick carpet. They didn't look at me. They didn't look at her. They just left. Claire's hand was still holding her phone. Her arm was stiff, half raised, her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "You," she whispered. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a sound. the sound of a final piece clicking into place. The smooth voice was gone. The business voice was gone. The annoyed voice was gone. This was a voice I had never heard before. It was small. It was hollow. I didn't nod. I didn't speak. I just held her gaze. She thought I was a moody intern. A piece of furniture. A child playing on her phone. She looked at me, but she had never, ever seen me. Now she did. In her eyes, I saw the party. I saw her rolling her eyes when Grandma called. I saw her hand dismissing me, telling me to do my homework. I saw the Claire's Biz 1 password she had never bothered to change. The last investor walked past me, a blur of dark wool. The waiter, who had been frozen by the service door, quietly began to clear the untouched appetizers. Claire's shoulders slumped. The power, the electric energy she used to fill a room was just gone. She looked down at the empty, polished table. She was just a woman in a dark blue dress, alone in a very expensive room. I held her gaze for one more second. Then I turned. I walked back down the quiet carpeted hall. I didn't run. My sneakers made no sound. I pushed open the heavy front door of the restaurant. The cold, wet air hit my face. It smelled like the city, like rain and pavement. It felt real. I walked to the bus stop. The bus arrived, hissing, its lights cutting through the drizzle. I got on. I sat in the back, just as I had on the way there. I watched the dark glass towers of her world get smaller as we crossed the bridge. The bus let me off on Grandma Evelyn Street. The bakery on the corner was dark, but the air still smelled faintly of yeast. I walked to her building, pushed open the heavy wooden door, and went inside. The hallway was warm. It smelled like old carpet and polish. I walked up the 2 flights of stairs. I heard her TV playing softly behind her door. A game show. I knocked. The TV clicked off. Coming! I heard the chain slide, the locks turn, the door opened. Evelyn stood there in her thick cardigan. She saw me, and her face broke into a relieved smile. Maya. Oh, thank goodness. You're here. She pulled me in and I let her. The apartment was bright and warm. The kettle was whistling in the kitchen. I got an email, she said, her voice a little shaky. She led me to the small dining table. A new bank, it said. Well, I didn't understand it. But then I saw this. It came in the mail today. She pointed to a single white envelope on the table. It was from the Secure Trust Bank. I sat down. She sat across from me. I picked up the envelope. I pulled out the single folded piece of paper. It was a bank statement. Her name was at the top. Evelyn Vance. And under current balance, there was a number. It was the money. All of it. Evelyn was watching my face, not the paper. Is it real? She whispered. I pushed the paper across the table to her. I pointed at the number. She put on her reading glasses, which were hanging from a chain around her neck. She leaned close. She read the number. Her hand went to her mouth. A small sound escaped. She looked at the paper for a long time. The only sound in the apartment was the tick-tick-tick of her kitchen clock. When she finally looked up, she wasn't crying. She wasn't even smiling. Her face was calm, but the worry, the thin, papery fear that had been in her eyes for months, was gone. She reached across the table, her hand trembling just a little. She didn't touch the paper. She put her hand on top of mine. Her skin was warm and dry. You know, she said, her voice quiet and clear, the money is one thing. It's a wonderful thing. But that's not the part. She squeezed my hand. It's knowing I wasn't invisible, she said. Knowing that someone saw. That's the part that matters. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the small, strong woman who smelled like tea leaves and lavender. The woman who had been dismissed, just like me. I turned my hand over and held hers. We just sat there, in the warm, quiet apartment. We didn't talk about Claire. We didn't talk about the investors or the restaurant. We didn't have to. We just sat, together.